where we were presented with an extremely convincing and cogent argument, which I faithfully documented in the poster, which is the idea of reimagining a South Africa that remediates the environmental disaster that we as humans have created and devises a new society with a sustainable economy in a socially conscious, ethical pathway towards a just transition. And that sounded great until we had question time. So I had in the meantime been drawing this kind of quite generic sort of failure of the human project graphic, which I've done many times in my life. But the questions started coming in, and I then started to make a lot of markings onto the poster, documenting some of the commentary that was coming back, the countertext to the message that the poster was purportedly giving. And the first one was, and I can't remember the individual people who made these points, if you focus on low carbon, what will fossil fuel workers lose from a just transition? Then the second, they're not necessarily in the order that they were given, but I'm just going to run down the page. This system, and I think Jay probably said this, is now making people poorer. So, somebody else said, it's fine talking about ethical pathways towards a just transition, but we have serious trust issues. You know, this is the effect of the last 9 years, maybe the last 25 years, maybe the entire history that we've been through. You know, so trust then emerges as one of our biggest issues. And then somebody else said, I think it was Jay again, we have to come to terms with who we are. How do we do that? Now, somebody else said, we can only do it through co-creation. But where is the guarantee of being able to deliver on the vision? You know, it's all very well to have a vision, but where's the guarantee of being able to deliver on it, you know? And whose process is it really, you know? And what kind of developmental model are we going to choose? As we've seen today, we've got numerous differences of opinion on this. But this has become particularly urgent, you know? So this takes us to the whole question. It's all very well to say that our three priorities is to tackle poverty, inequality, and unemployment. But how? You know, you look at all the positive ideas. You know, you look at the social compact, you look at the process being transformative in nature, you look at economy and society-wide approach, you look at just and equitable, you look at things like transparency, inclusivity, full cost accounting, ecosystems approach, resilience, adaptation. You look at being part of global human solidarity. You look at getting a mix on things like the energy consensus. You look at a low carbon future. You look at the timing. You look at inclusive developmental approaches. You know, this is all good stuff, but in a way, this is all jargon as well. These are very well-heeled phrases. The question is, how do we shift the economy without creating new problems? How do we fix the state without getting into a worse state? You know? And what are the questions that the NDP itself fails to address? So then the other nitty-gritty little questions started to come in, you know? Can economic growth give us a just transition? You know? Are we prepared to let go of the just transition in order that everybody can be better off? You know? there is a sense of fatigue around these issues, you know. How do we address inequality and unemployment? How do we address any of this if we can't address any of this unless what? You know, just take the digital economy, for instance. It's so complicated. We're so behind. We're not addressing the environmental crisis. So, where does that leave us? Over to you, Jay.
Well, and you have captured it so well. For me, this represents our loss of human values. It represents our alienation from who we really are. It represents greed. It's an idea that the future is the present. So we have no idea that we have intergenerational obligations. We have no hesitation to poison our atmosphere, our air, pollute our oceans, kill our oceans, murder the very planet that is here to nourish us. We have no idea of this priceless gift that we've been given. You know, you don't have to teach a seed what to do. You know, you plant it in the soil, it drops on the tree, it will grow into a sapling, and then become a tree, and then produce fruit and produce more trees. We have lost the idea of what is the natural law that governs our planet. You know? And so we see no hesitation to produce the type of economic growth that feeds our insane, addiction to consumption. All of us. Even here. Look at the amount of food we had yesterday. But we're talking about transition to what? You reflected on that, Andy. So what is the lifestyle we've got to live? How are we following that? So at the end of the day, it has to be the individual that makes that commitment, that makes that social compact, that covenant with something bigger than who we are. Otherwise, we recreate a new system, or we transition to a new system that ends up in the same place, because we've lost values, we've lost ethics, we've lost the notion that we are here to serve. This is what's happened to our political situation, and this is dying. If you look at young people today, they're not interested, they don't trust us. They don't trust political leaders, business leaders, trade union leaders, government leaders. There's a tremendous alienation of the next generation from everything that our generation represents. Are we prepared to embrace that conversation? Are we prepared to listen in a different way to those voices? And those voices are now articulating something really different from what we believe should be the narrative. So how do we construct the dialogues that matter, that are meaningful, on issues that matter, that are meaningful, with people that matter? Whereas making the assumption that we have it, even in the way we debate, even if you have such noble intentions, how do you construct that? How do you deal with the fact that they may fundamentally disagree with you? When young people from Feast Must Fall said, "You guys betrayed us," I didn't say no. I said we made many mistakes. If you want to sit here, I will sit here for a week with you and I still wouldn't finish with the mistakes that we made. And there's a context to those mistakes. So the authenticity of the conversation has to be an understanding that we did make mistakes, that no one is perfect. And so that's the admission of truth. So the issue of just transition, what I've understood in the last few years, that actually I'm learning more about what we want to transition to from indigenous people, which are invisible in this debate that we are having. But they have a wisdom that's deep and profound, because they never left the original purpose of why we are here as stewards of this beautiful planet. They still understand that. But what have we done? We've ridiculed them, demonized them, We've murdered them. And we continue to do that. So in these conversations, how do we bring in that voice of indigenous wisdom? One of the biggest sectors that is going to be growing in this country, like we see in the United States, is medical cannabis, which is a miracle drug. It's not a drug, a medical plant, a sacred plant that belongs to the tradition. But what's happening today is because the pharmaceutical sector has seen profits, huge profits, and because our political elites have seen huge profits, anyone who have been planting these things, like in Pondoland or KwaZulu-Natal, and Lesotho for thousands of years, if they don't buy into this capture of this value chain, the entire fields and everything in those villages are poisoned. And they use our security forces to do that. So increasingly what we see, like in the Platinum Bank, people are marginalized. So we created an economy which we serve as human beings, whereas we should have an economy that serves society. Now, what is that society? And the society is not just human beings. It's everything that exists on this planet. And so, yes, I think the question of, are we going through a new cycle for a new system, but we'll end up in the same place? So whose voices should be heard? Who should be in this room? And how do we understand the intergenerationality of our transition? And so, yes, I think that it has to be on the basis of what values we have and we carry. What Mandela described as connecting the head, the heart, and the spirit. To know who we are. Because without knowing who we are and why we are here, we think we are here just to serve ourselves. And so I think you're starting to capture, how do we put that soul, that heart, that spirituality back into the economy, back into politics, back into labor, so it doesn't become a fight for power, because there are two choices in life. They're either based on fear or based on love. And what we admire the most about Mandela is that he made the choice to base his life and his commitment on love rather than fear. So how do we deal in the conversation with people who have fear? Fear of workers losing jobs, fear of politicians losing the vote in elections, fear of ourselves losing what we have. And that question of what is the sacrifice we want to make from the individual to the collective is one of the most important discussions of this process, of how it will be different to the 1,000 other processes we've had that don't produce the results, that don't capture the imagination of people in our country.